Right now I'm getting ready to release StateAdapt 1.0. I'm really close. The last thing I needed to do, the last major piece of work, was to create an entity adapter. So that's what I've done, and that was released in version 0.60. A lot of versions. It's ready for 1.0. It's really close. So I converted a project from NgRx component store to StateAdapt so that I could test the entity adapter on like a real project. I have unit tests in there, but I wanted to see how it feels to use on like actual projects. So I'm going to do a couple of these. And this one, when I converted it, it went from the final bundle size for the main bundle went from 139 kilobytes to 100 kilobytes. So, but before they weren't using the entity adapter in NgRx, and so the bundle size probably would have been more if they had used that. So anyway, so that's how I was able to decrease the lines of code by a bunch as well. It was going to be maybe, 40% decrease in the lines of code. And instead it went from 255 to 115. So that's a decrease by 55%. So I decreased the lines of code by a ton, 55%, and then the overall bundle size by 28%, even though I was using an additional part of StateAdapt that wasn't used in the NgRx implementation. So how did the lines of code reduce exactly? Here's the code. I'm not going to bother looking at the actual UI because there isn't really any CSS for it. It's kind of ugly, but the code is what matters. So anyway, so you have student state. I'm not sure what DTO is. I'm not sure what it is, but it's like a data type and it has something to do with forms. I didn't really mess with this. But this is how the code was before. And that part didn't change. So they define the state shape there, the initial state, and then they're using component store here. And they're also, this is part of the thing that explains the larger bundle size. They're importing NgRx and NgRx component store because here they want to link the component store to global state. So yeah, with StateAdapt, it's always linked to global state. So, but it feels like local state. So that's a cool thing with StateAdapt. And that's how, I don't know, that might explain most of the bundle size difference. But anyway, so that's what they're doing with all these stores. But and they also have their, just a selector for that piece of state. And then they have this save student method function that's just like, it's just setting the student DTO. And then they have reset student state. So these are very basic operations. And so if you're familiar with StateAdapt at all, you know that these are things that just come with every state adapter. So all state and StateAdapt is managed with state adapters. And if you're going to create a state adapter for something, you will just automatically get these functions. So here it is with StateAdapt. So this is in the global store. You can look in Redux DevTools and you'll see a student property of the global store that contains this state. So it's pretty simple. You define the state like before, initial state, the same thing, but then you use join adapters. Oops, right here. Join adapters. So this property of state, so it reflects the same. I talked about this in the last video I did, but the idea of state adapters is they don't have to be done this way, but I think it's cool to do it this way. It's really convenient. It's that they reflect the same state shape, the same shape as state. Okay, gosh, that was difficult. Okay, so you have a property here, and this is when you pass this to join adapters, you're basically saying this is the state shape here, and we want to manage this property of it with this adapter. So your state management logic and patterns can be extremely simple. They're focused on just what's inside the property. You don't have to define these for the entire state shape. And in this case, all we need is set and reset. So that's just going to be a really basic adapter. So we just create the adapter for that state shape. We initialize some state with it. And now that just becomes available. So if we look at the component where it's being used, now we just do, instead of, where was that? Save. Where's the save? Yeah, down here. Yeah, instead of save student, whatever, it inherits this name by or from this. So this state adapter has set and reset. So when you want to call it on this parent adapter, you do dot set student DTO or dot reset student DTO. So that is calling set there. So yeah, very, very basic logic happening here. Very simple feature. This right here, as you can see from the comment, this is how you hold state. So this service, once it gets constructed, it lives forever. And so this, you're not going to have a memory leak, because this, you can subscribe and it will just hold on to the state. With StateAdapt, if you unsubscribe from state, it clears it out of the store. And so the way you cache it, or you manage that cache, is you just manage subscriptions. So if you know that you want the state to stay there, you just subscribe to it somewhere, wherever you have like really fine-grained control over when the state, the life cycle state, when it gets created, when it gets destroyed. So yeah, like 4 lines of code for that, but I want it to behave the exact same as before. All right, now the next feature is dresses or books. These are actually pretty much identical, these two stores, so it kind of doesn't matter which one we look at, and it doesn't affect the ratio of the code difference. So we're just going to look at one. The typo here with 3 S's, but anyway, so this is the state shape. I don't know what the deal is with this constructor thing. This is never actually used. But this list here is the dress interface. And then they have a user preferred dress ID list. I would just call it preferred dresses IDs, or preferred, something like that. But anyway, so yeah, the list is kind of implied because it's a list. But anyway, so those 2 properties. There's just an array of primitives. So this isn't good to use entity for, but this has an ID property. So this is perfect for entity. All right. And it's even more perfect for entity because it looks like the exact same types of updates that NgRx entity does. So I don't know exactly why they didn't do NgRx entity before with this, but maybe they just didn't feel like it or didn't know about it yet. But it would have been nice for this. It still wouldn't have been as minimal, but it would have been nice. Anyway, so do the same. They're doing the same thing here, linking it to global state. They're selecting from it, and they've got this thing, add dress. It just concats the array. So that's pretty basic. They have update. It's just replacing the dress with the one that's passed in. And then remove, exactly what it sounds like. Reset, what it sounds like. And then with favorite, they've got some weird logic here. And I kept this function the exact same form, even though it's like totally unnecessary. I just wanted the comparison to be as fair as possible. So I kept that. I really wanted to get rid of it. This one, I restructured this a little bit to use a ternary because this became a state change in a state adapter. So, but this is just it's used here. So when they add a dress to their favorites, it updates the list for that, and it will grab the index. So it's like upsert. If it uses, or if the ID is already in there, we just return the original one. If it's not in there, return the ID. So yeah, now you see, like, all this logic is just for that. So yeah, I kept it mostly the same. Yeah. Anyway, so let's look at how I did it with StateAdapt. All right, here it is. A lot shorter, only 59 lines of code. Here's that function I was talking about. I kept it, and this is the other function that I changed. I turned it into a ternary because it is now an adapter functions, reaction, whatever I call them. So so we have the same interface. I got rid of the constructor. It's only 3 lines of code I got rid of, so whatever. Maybe 4, I don't know. And then the initial state with entity, this is actually a bug that I found while working on this. You have to, not a bug, it's just unpleasant. You have to pass in the type of ID you have. So with DTO, it's number, and by default, that's not what entity expects, I guess. So you got to pass in number, but you won't have to do that in the next version of StateAdapt. Anyway, so this is the shape. It's the same shape as before. Initial state. To create the initial entity state, you call this function from NgRx entity. And then the adapters. So first I started with an adapter because this is entity state. And so you're going to have an adapter for the individual entities. So for dress, so dress adapter. And it's just the exact same thing we saw with the other feature, very simple, just basic set and reset functions here. And then you pass the adapter of the individual entity into the createEntityAdapter function. And this does all kinds of cool things. But it's just basic usage on this project. But anyway, so you build up these adapters, and now this is going to go here. So when we join adapters, okay, so first, so when we join adapters, we just pass that in to the same place as the state interface it's managing. And with the preferred dress list, I create an adapter for that as well. And it's just a number array with this one function. So what I did here is, instead of implementing the one state change function on top level, I created an adapter for just the array. And so this prevents me from having to do like object spreading and stuff. Join adapters takes care of that. So if I just have a function that takes care of how this state can change by itself, I don't have to worry about, drilling down and spreading the state object. It's just really convenient to be able to define it like this. So that's one of the reasons this ended up being simpler, I think, maybe. So yeah. And then they had a selector. Here's my selector. It just takes the preferred IDs and maps to the actual entities for those. All right, and that's basically it. Same thing as in the other feature here. I have a subscription so that it's always there. The state's always in the store. And then I just sort of, I didn't have to do this, but it was a line of code they had in their, in their implementation. So I didn't want to, you don't have to, but I didn't want to be really unfair. So anyway, you could say I was already unfair because I used the entity adapter and they didn't. But even if I hadn't, the lines of code would have been at least 30% less with StateAdapt anyway. And they were 55% less. So it's a pretty big difference. And entity helped a bit. It's probably responsible for half of the difference, maybe. But even then I used it and it was, the overall bundle size was smaller. So, if you can use extra utilities and you're still using less code total, I don't feel like that's cheating, but whatever. That's not the point. The point was to just get experience with using this new entity adapter that I made. But anyway, so yeah. So StateAdapt has a bunch of advantages just with it. By default, it's in the global store, so we don't have to connect. And then the entity adapter is pretty nice to use, and we can construct state like this. Just nest it, create one adapter for each data type, and sort of nest it as the same way we nest state. So, yep, that's pretty cool. All right, that's it for this video. That was incredible. So, yeah, I am so far pretty happy with this. So, yeah, I'm going to do another one of these for probably a bigger project, and then I'm going to do a video about misconceptions about reactivity that I've heard recently. So I just want to focus on the definition of reactivity and kind of clear it up. Anyway, yeah. So, all right. So that's today's video. Thanks for watching. See ya.